Yes, I know the mic was muted for a reason on the main stream. So, okay, it is working. That's good. I think we're finally in play. And I want to wish you all not a good morning, but a good afternoon. This is a highly unusual afternoon Freedom Coffee live stream. And I do tend to do these in the mornings. I was going to do this on Saturday as usual, but there was a lot going on this weekend and it was not possible. And a number of you have asked me in the past few minutes, actually. So I'll answer that question. No, no, I am not in Las Vegas, and yes, I am in need of a haircut, and yes, my hair is curly. But I will get to that later in the week. And it's just, there's times when there's so much going on in your life, and there's a lot. It's a lot of good things. It's not a complaint, but you got to grind through and get things done and move on to the next thing. And I really kind of enjoy that. I like when there's a lot of things going on, but sometimes the simple tasks that are not part of broader projects, they're not things you can get into. So that's the state I'm in right now as I'm getting ready to leave the country again tomorrow for a few days. So I want to start with happy, well, maybe not happy, but a good Memorial Day to my friends in the US. And for the few people that have just been texting me over the past hour, uh, no, no, I'm not in Las Vegas. So I'm sorry I couldn't make it this year. For those who are wondering, this week is the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, which I spoke at in 22 and I've been going ever since. But there's just too much going on in my life. I am going to be speaking at Bitcoin Day in Tampa, in Florida, on June the 14th. So if you are in the area, and if you're a lover of Bitcoin or freedom, or both would be even better, then head out to Bitcoin Day in Tampa and let's hang out. I'll be there for a couple of days. I'm actually going to stay there as opposed to the other side of Florida where I spend most of my time. And yeah, so let's hang out. And if you want to learn about Bitcoin, you're new to Bitcoin, you're confused about it, you don't know why you need Bitcoin, then this is the perfect day for you to come out to a smaller conference. It's very intimate. Everybody gets to kind of hang out with the speakers and the attendees. So if you can, try to make it out to Tampa. I see we just had an attack in Liverpool. Everyone is upset over. There was a soccer celebration, not in Liverpool. I think it might have been in London, but it was in England, and it was a celebration of Liverpool winning their Premier League. Somebody drove into a car of peace, ran over a bunch of people yet again, and that is going to continue. And there's going to be more and more of that, unfortunately. But we'll talk more and more about that in the future. I by the way, somebody mentioned to me, I don't know who those people are in the thumbnail for this. you know, Working with AI, learning AI, as we all are, and finding how to incorporate it into our workflow, which I think is really important. I think everybody should be doing it. Using this AI engine, and I'm getting pretty good at prompting, but I don't know whose face that is, and it looks like they took the thumbnail of Scott Adams and Elon and they superimposed, I think, my face on Scott and Scott's face on Elon Musk. I thought it was hysterical. Good enough that we had to keep it just for fun, just for S and giggles, if you know what I mean. So there's a couple of good. Let's start with some good things, some good news, some developments in the world that we need to pay attention to. Oh, hold on, that's my truck mechanic telling me my truck is ready, and now is not really the time. So the good news. One of the things I thought it was funny. You should check this out. It's on X. It's from an account called Science Girl. And it's one of these people that's just posting a lot of science stuff, which is kind of refreshing because so much online social media is just political nonsense being thrown in your face, and yeah, it does get a little tiresome. So the this post from Science Girl, it reads this, and you tell me what you think. Japanese researchers have developed a soft robotic tongue that mimics the sensation of a real tongue. It it has the, and you see the video. It's kind of weird. It has the potential applications in therapy. No, I know what you were thinking. Get your mind out of the gutter. This is for therapy. It's for elderly care for robotic pets. You believe that? Like, was that on the original build sheet? Was that the design criteria? The problem they need to solve? That, oh yeah, we need artificial tongues for elderly people so they can pretend it's dogs, they're dogs. Or maybe it's something else. Anyways, I know what you're all thinking, and that's what I was thinking too. It was absolutely hysterical. And then in another scientific post online, and this was on X as well. This was in Science Magazine. This is pretty cool. According to Science Magazine, researchers have presented a stretchable organic solar cell with an efficiency of over 16% and the ability to maintain performance under significant strain. The results pave the way for durable, flexible power sources for next generation devices. So, one of the issues with designing anything that's hardware is the lack of flexibility, especially when, we're in the robot AI craze. Well, wouldn't that significantly solve some of the problems for robots if you can have the battery be somewhat malleable and can change form a little bit? So I thought that was very interesting, especially since we're really on the cusp of another Tesla event. I don't know. I imagine there's going to be some announcements regarding their robot. And there's many other, robotic companies. Boston Dynamics, I think, is the most successful with it. But the reason I bring these things up is because, there's so much negativity that we see in social media, and it's really easy to get trapped in a permanent a negative headspace. And, we forget that there's so much developments going on in the world today in the areas of science and technology, astronomy. For those who are following what's going on with the James Webb Telescope, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I don't think we took enough time to sit back and look at all the achievements that are going on in the world. Some of them are really quite amazing. Good afternoon, Cheryl. It's good to see you, sweetheart. I hope you are well. Thank you for joining. So that's those are some of the good things. And now I don't know how long we'll go today, but there's a few things I wanted to get through here that I wanted to talk about on the weekend. How to describe this? This was, an emotional gut wrench to a lot of people, especially people who are engaged in social media and on YouTube and obviously locals and that sort of stuff. A week ago today, actually, Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, and he does a daily podcast and a number of other things. Scott Adams announced last week that he is terminally ill. And without getting into the details, it's not really all that. I mean, it's important, but let's not focus on that. But and that came as a shock to a number of people. You could see the outpouring of support and concern and shock from people online. And it was very interesting. You saw it from people across the political spectrum. It was quite refreshing to see that, to be entirely honest. And these are many people who have been following him for years, listening to his podcast, obviously, and read his books. I first I first encountered Scott Adams when I was in high school, and my friends and I would be, hanging out during spares or lunch, and one of our friends always brought a Dilbert comic when they were available, and this was, in the '90s. And here we are. I happen to be one of the people who watches his listens to his daily stream, and read a few of his books, not all of them, but I've read a few of them. And by the way, Reframe Your Brain by Scott Adams. That is a book I think we need to recommend to a lot of people, especially in this time where there's so much anxiety because we're being pumped with propaganda on social media that's there designed specifically to cause fear and anxiety and all that sort of stuff. And if you know people that are struggling and going through some stuff, that book is amazing. I thought it was. If you understand the technique of reframing, something I learned many, many years ago, this is, I would call it the starter's guide to reframing, and there's something in there for everyone, even if you, what's it called? Even if you know what reframing is, there's going to be something in it. So, highly recommend the book, Reframe Your Brain. I have it behind me here on the counter. So I did an article that was just actually released on Zero Hedge today. So I posted it on my Substack, this Substack here, and it was picked up by the Daily Bell and then by Zero Hedge today. And I want to explain the premise of that article because it's quite important. NPC says, I like his hypnosis and simulation theory. Yeah, the simulation theory stuff comes from Nick Bostrom, and I like it too. Not that I'm necessarily a believer in it. I'm not a believer in stuff in general, but I do like having. It's a good way to have multiple models of the world, and so you can look at different problems with different models. It's like taking off one hat and putting on another hat. Taking off the theologic philosophy hat, putting on the simulation hat to just explore things in different ways, which is something I think is quite important. But anyways, I did this article, and the premise of the article, or the name of the article, is Grok Adams: A Legacy Worth Programming, and you can find it in Zero Hedge or in this Substack. And the idea is, I walk through what he's done, kind of his contributions to public discourse, and his ability to help some of us de-radicalize people, meaning listen to people on the other side. Doesn't mean you agree with them, but understand them. And I think that's why there was an outpouring support from all sides. I posted in the article, I embedded in the article, the video, a short little video from the Five, Greg Gutfeld. I knew they know each other. I didn't realize how close they were. And Greg Gutfeld did a short little tribute to Scott that day as well, which was it's quite nice. It's quite touching and quite appropriate. And I was writing this article thinking, what can we do? That was kind of the premise. We often get into these scenarios where people we know are sick. And whenever we know somebody who is sick like that, we feel, at least I do, and I think most of us do, we feel impotent and highly emotional because there's nothing you can do. You can't control the state that this person's health is in. So I remembered back that over the past couple of years, Scott Adams has been he's been experimenting with AI tools, many AI tools, as we all have, but he's been talking about them on his stream in much more detail than I do. I think some of the people here, they hear the word AI and they just turn off, right? NPC, I'm sure you agree with that. Um, always consider weird ideas. Yeah, that is true. And I'll always consider all ideas. Doesn't mean you agree with them, but you got to at least hear them. And the best thing to do is hear the best arguments from the other side, even when you disagree, right? So he had been talking about all these different AI tools that we all, all of us are a little bit tech nerdy, had been trying, and it seemed to be he was trying to build an AI of himself. And well, now we know why, because we now know that he's sick. And it was very interesting to listen to this process over a long period of time, and all the different tools he discovered and tried, and what worked, what didn't work. And by the way, surprise, nothing worked. That we're just too early in AI, right? We're in AI version 1.0. This is the early stages where just, 10 years from now, we'll think how simplistic the AI was at that time, right? So he had been trying to build out uh, this system for replicating himself for after he was gone. And so that was one thing that popped into my head. But then I remembered something else. I started thinking about something else, that I tested a Tesla a number of weeks ago. And I haven't put a post out yet about it yet on Substack. I'm going to soon, because I have something in depth and some video and a comparison with the Tesla and the Polestar. But this was my first experience with full self-driving, which is way better, by the way, than autopilot. It was absolutely amazing. It's like going into the future, being like driven warp speed into the future. It was a surreal experience, at least for me, being a car guy. And when I was testing that Tesla, I had it for a couple days, I believe. I learned from Grok, or I learned from Tesla, that Grok was going to be implemented into Tesla. And I explained this in the article, that most of us have cars that have voice activation, which is the least used button on most of our steering wheels. I have it. I think I've used it twice, and it's awful. It's horrible. And it's because the computing process then doesn't understand um, contextual language. And not that AI does, but it mimics the understanding of contextual language. That's why you can have a conversation with it. And I was informed that Tesla will be implementing Grok into their voice activation feature in their cars. I thought, oh well, that's pretty cool. And I remembered this when I was watching and listening to Scott's podcast when he was explaining his illness. And right away, I just jumped into, okay, what can we do to help him? And I thought, well, maybe that's it. Maybe what we can do is try to reach out to the staff at Tesla or Elon Musk, and maybe they can offer a feature in the upcoming Grok integration where Scott Adams' voice or persona, or voice and persona, becomes an option on the voice activation in Tesla cars. So they tried, if you remember when Grok first came out, they tried mimicking another character, another Adams, Douglas Adams, one of my favorite authors, and I think for many of us. And it just didn't track well. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't the right fit and feel for the use case of how we utilize AI and implement it in our lives. But maybe this is the solution for it. And I go on to explain that more in the article. So if you haven't read it yet, please check it out. I don't know. I think it's good for all of us when we see somebody that we like or admire or have learned from. And Gutfeld was very explicit about that so much of what he does on his show, he has learned from Scott Adams in terms of his communication style. And maybe if that sort of that ability to de-stress and to reduce anxiety while people are in the car in their morning drive, or maybe they're going to the doctor for bad news or going to school or whatever it is. Maybe that is a feature beyond just the use case of a voice activation. So check out the article. It's in the Zero Hedge right now. It's in my Substack here for those of you who are following it on Substack. Check it out. And if you agree, if you could, grab it, copy the link, and send it to Tesla and Elon Musk and tag them. It's an easy way to do something nice. I don't know if something will materialize from it, but doing nice for other people, it makes you feel good about yourself. It helps with the anxiety, and sometimes it helps the person that you feel impotent to be able to help them. I'm saying that word maybe because of that tongue article in the beginning. But you know what I mean? It's I saw the amount of sadness, but it was genuine, and it was both sad, obviously, but also refreshing that everybody could just drop the politics for 5 minutes and the brainwashing from politics and actually show some genuine emotion and concern. And that was nice to see. So if you agree, the link, I'll put it in the description in YouTube when I'm done. If you're on Substack, it's there. It's the most recent article I'm in, and or I've written. You can find it there. Just try to give it a shout out and see if we can do something with it. I use pain reprocessing therapy to help conquer chronic pain. Hey, I'm sorry, Cheryl. And but if you find something that works for you, then share it with the world, right? Because lots of us are going through stuff. Lots of us who have families who go through stuff, and I don't know. I just always felt it. People always ask me why I'm so secure. And maybe it's because I try to do things for people, try to help people with stuff, and it builds a certain inner strength where things don't really bother you, right? Yes, great idea. Not to mention, Scott has a soothing voice. Yeah, he's he's trained, right? So that would be a great option for Tesla. I'm even looking and considering a Tesla, maybe not this year, maybe next year, thinking about it. And that would definitely put me over the edge for sure. All right, so let's get into, since we discussed Scott, we can discuss some of what he's contributed to people in terms of communication and how it's going to help us, and maybe a way to look at the world, because there's a whole lot of nonsense going on social media. Well, on X, I guess, is the worst because it's the most free speech adjacent platform, and people have forgotten how to behave. They behave like maniacs. They forgot that there's something to be said for being polite and decorum and educated and having class. And there's a lot of people who don't have any of that. And most of the people are from other parts of the world, Pakistan. But sorry. If you join our space, you'll understand why that is relevant. And by the way, tonight, 7 p.m., I'll be co-hosting a space with Andrea, specifically on a related topic as it relates to Latin America and its dangerous influence on the United States and the Western world. So that's 7 o'clock tonight is the space. So I wanted to go through one of the ideas that, he talks about this, but this is, if you've studied communications for a long time, as some of us have, you would know this. Anybody in marketing, I think, could maybe not articulate it quite as well, but they would understand this phenomenon. And that is, how do we get our opinions? So I want to start with something first, which is something we've discussed on this stream. For those of you who've been following on YouTube for some time, Cheryl would know this, as would Pam and the rest of you. who are the least credible people in society? There's three people. We've talked about this many times. The least credible people in society are politicians, the media, and lawyers. And I always say lawyers with an asterisk because they are hired often to be deceptive. So it's not necessarily the individual. NPC, that's not nice. I do love your comments. I do read them. Sometimes I can't say them. That's one of them, but that's funny. NPC's talking about Pakistan. So, how do we form our opinions? Well, the part of the problem that we have right now is, we always talk. We hear the people talk broadly about the problem of propaganda without getting into the specifics. So let's get into the specifics a little bit. So, news in the past has increasingly been replaced by social media, which is, I've mentioned this before, media news in the past used to be unidirectional. Sorry, I have an itch. It's not something coming out, just itchy. News in the past used to be unidirectional. It was top down, and now news is bidirectional. So it's top down from legacy media, for example, and it's bottom up from the average person who either can respond to it, reply and respond to it, or they can extract it and put it on their own feed and then do a critique of legacy media to their own audiences. So media is now bidirectional. And this is part of the reason many of you might have noticed that we see a lot of strange proto-commie opinions and narratives throughout global social media, which is another issue. So media used to be very localized. So you'd have local news and national news in most parts of the world. But now it's the same news all over the world that people are getting. And much of it is just horse manure. That's it. It's just nonsense. It's really ridiculous opinions that many are just fabrications that are laundered as news on social media. That's part of the big problem we're dealing with. And now we have, in the Western world, which is constantly under attack, as it would be in any case. It's the most powerful economy is always going to be attacked by the weaker economies. It's just the way it is. And there are all these foreign interpretations that are infused, and fabrications that are infused in our media, trying to persuade and brainwash people. And who are the people who are most easy to brainwash? Younger people, which is what TikTok is for. There is that people have discussed that heat button, we like to say. That's a good visual way to look at it. But that TikTok can be amplified if, I don't know, the Chinese Communist Party decides they want to cause chaos in the West, and some idiot is wearing the terrorist rag and saying kill whatever group, they can press a button and just amplify it to cause additional chaos in the West, which is what's going on now. People are becoming brainwashed by this because they're not looking for opinions that disagree with them. They're just seeking confirmation bias. They adopt the first opinion that they have, and then it's chasing confirmation bias all the way down. And this is why some of you may have family members or friends that you're really confused by their opinions. They just seem really ridiculous and radical. This is why, because they're just, through repetition, they're hearing the same nonsense over and over again. Repetition and social proof are two of the most powerful persuasion tactics that are used to change people's opinion. And this has led to a pervasiveness of hoaxes in our society. The hoaxes out of the legacy media, alternative media. I mentioned TikTok. Like, most of this stuff is complete and utter nonsense. But it gets repeated, copied, pasted over and over again. So let's talk about some examples, right? Because people are always talking about this broadly. Let's talk about specific examples. And The example that I'd like to use is, let's talk about what are some of the hoaxes that we saw. And this comes from Scott and that group that were working through this through the last couple of elections. There were a ton of hoaxes around Donald Trump and the election, the Republicans, and all that sort of stuff. So much that I have people in my family that are completely brainwashed and unable to think critically on this. They just jump into emotion. It's full limbic system activation when they hear the word Trump, and they lose their temper, they lose their faculties. I'm sure we've all experienced people like that. That's why they're switching from their cerebral cortex to their limbic system, because it's a trigger word, right? This is where you hear triggering from. It's no coincidence they're using the word trigger. It was popularized on university campuses because it came from, many people in the social sciences who understood this, that you can associate a word with an emotional state of outrage and program people to just, boom, explode with outrage when they hear a specific word. And that's a big part of what's happening on other stuff we'll get into in a few minutes. So let's go through this short list. It's 20 things. And this is not about what your political leanings are or not. Hopefully most of you are somewhat open-minded, let's say, open-minded to all sorts of ideas, right? So we'll go through one, and this is through 1 to 20, and this is the list of hoaxes that we were seeing through the last couple of election cycles in the US. I'm not American, but we saw this in global media all over the place, right? Because, that triggering I was talking about, that's the TDS component. That's what it leads to. That's how they build it, right? So in this case, there was the Russian collusion hoax, the Steele dossier hoax. Do I got to explain what these are? Maybe I will in a minute. The Russian bounties hoax, the fine people hoax, overfeeding the koi fish hoax. Remember when Trump was in Japan? Bible photo op tear gas hoax, Hunter Biden laptop hoax, January 6th insurrection hoax, Border Patrol whipping hoax. Remember the horses? They're just riding horses like normally. Drinking bleach hoax. Remember that? The shadow banning hoax. Trump tax returns hoax. Trump's mental fitness hoax. Trump's racism hoax. Trump's misogyny hoax. Trump's xenophobia hoax. Trump's Islamophobia hoax. Trump's anti-Semitism hoax. Trump's homophobia hoax, Trump's transgender hoax. So that's just 20 of them. There's a lot more, but it's not really relevant. We're looking at the tactic and how this works. NPC. That is very funny. NPC says, hookers peeing is my favorite hoax. Yeah. So the Russian collusion hoax was the claim that Trump colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. The Steele dossier, the credibility of the Steele dossier alleging Trump's ties to Russia, that was a complete hoax. The koi fish hoax claims that Trump improperly fed fish during a visit to Japan. That's how radicalized people were with this emotional state. They saw him feed the fish, which they thought was improper, and they lost their minds. And they didn't notice that the person next to him, who was the leader of Japan, did the exact same thing, right? So it's just evidence that people can be programmed. If they're primed and ready, you can program people to believe absolutely anything. I thought we would have learned this a long time ago, but we still haven't. So there's one particular hoax I want to address, and this is what Scott and Lysix and a few other people have been talking about for a number of years, and that is the fine people hoax. And there's a reason this is important. The fine people hoax, the assertion that that Trump referred to white supremacists as very fine people after the Charlottesville riots, which we've now learned was an op from the onset, right? So the assertion, remember, we all saw that. Those who, like Trump, understood it was BS, because if you just listened to the whole thing, you would have heard him say, I'm not saying about those particular people. He said, I'm just talking about regular people who are there. But they went with this for years, and Biden arguably got elected because of this hoax, because people believed it. And the reason that is important, and NPC, you'll know that is what's called, I think this is how Scott laid it out, and he's so correct. His ability to articulate things that we've all understood for years is unsurpassed. It's absolutely amazing. The Fine People hoax is called, or is referenced as, the tent pole hoax. So what does that mean? The tent pole hoax. You have a long list of fabricated hoaxes. They're all fake, right? But much like a tent, right? Think of a circus tent. You have the one big main tent pole in the middle. And that supports all the other columns, all the other hoaxes. Because if people can believe that Donald Trump, whose children, half his children are Jewish, is a neo-Nazi, then they'll believe absolutely anything. That's the tent pole. And what's interesting about that is I think it was Bill Ackman. I don't remember where it was. But Bill Ackman explained, it might have been on trigonometry actually. He explained how he went from, I don't know if he would describe it having Trump derangement syndrome, but definitely not liking Trump and not knowing the full story, of going from disliking Trump to understanding that, oh, wait, I've been lied to for so long. What's going on? Cheryl, elbows up. Yeah, I know. We all got those people in our families too. So what Bill Ackman was explaining was his evolution, the process to which he woke up. And this is why this is important. The ability to wake people out of their echo chamber, it's not done just with facts. There's got to be a tactic behind the facts. And what Bill Ackman eventually ended up watching the entire press conference, the one that the media quote mined, quote edited, whatever you want to call it, where they took out the context, the before and after, and just clipped the part where he said there were fine people on both sides. And for years, he didn't look into the other side of the argument. This is why it's important to always listen to the other side. Sometimes the other side is correct. It does happen. People you disagree, sometimes we are wrong. And so he realized that. He finally decided, okay, I'm going to watch this whole news conference. And it must have been somewhat of an emotional shock to him to realize that, oh my God, everything they've been telling me for years was a lie. And the reason that was the tentpole hoax is because, as he said in his own words, once I realized the fine people hoax was a hoax, then I knew everything else was a lie. So that's the importance of the tentpole hoax. That holds up the credibility for all the other fabrications. And you can take the other fabrications one by one. You know, we've all experienced this when we tell people about something and you say, I'm trying to think of a good example, but when you say, I don't know, you say, Justin Trudeau, froze bank accounts. But then they're going to say, well, yeah, but it was justified because A, B, and C. They don't understand A, B, and C are a lie as well, right? So, but when you go after the tent pole, the whole tent collapses. And that's that's what the tentpole was and why it's important around the Trump administration. And this is why you're seeing a change in people coming from all sides now, realizing that, okay, maybe I don't like his rhetoric or how he talks, but the media has zero credibility. I want nothing to do with it. And by the way, this is why during the trucker convoy, I banned the legacy media from our press conferences, because I knew they would only use it as the opportunity to build hoaxes. And I told those other morons, keep them away. Well, two of the morons didn't listen, and they had a press conference with legacy media. And as soon as it was over, they started fabricating assertions in the form of questions about, I think I remember what it was, firearms or something like that. It was Glenn McGregor, that guy I threw out of my hotel room and had the manager of the hotel throw him out of the hotel because he's a maniac. But that's the strategy that media does with these scrums. The scrums are there to build hoaxes, to levy an assertion at you or multiple assertions. And if you deny them, now you've jumped into their frame. They own the frame and they can espouse whatever assertions on you that they want. So that's what has happened. So we understand this. This is the persuasion tactics. They build a ton of hoaxes. There's one tentpole hoax that has multiple hoaxes attached to it. And because there's so many things, that's what radicalizes people. Legacy media created the Nazi flag hoax as well. Yes. And I would argue that that is the tentpole hoax at the trucker convoy, for sure. We'll talk about that another time. Very, very astute. So the CBC, people don't like the CBC here. Smart. That's why I banned the CBC and the Toronto Star. And I don't know if I ever told you this. So just break this for a second. So during the trucker convoy, I needed to get the legacy media to talk about us. And I don't care if they say good things or bad. You call us neo-Nazis, I don't care what, it doesn't matter. Just need to talk about us. So what I did is I had a media list from when I was involved in politics. And I created an Eventbrite, and I sent an email to the main, my main media contact list that would have, people in all of legacy media. And I basically offered them, saying to everybody who wants to join our press conferences, you can send us a message and we will try to accommodate you, but we have a very small venue and we can't fit everybody in there. So let us know and we'll see if we can accommodate you. And I think the first fake news organization was the Globe and Mail, if I remember correctly. They responded almost immediately, said, oh yeah, we would like to come. And what I would do with every legacy fake news agency, I would get on the computer and I would type a response saying, I'm sorry, we don't recognize you as a credible news agency. You're not permitted to come. Thank you and have a nice day. I did that with all of them. They're so angry. So what's the next thing they do? Racists and white supremacists descend on Ottawa. I'm like, perfect. Took the bait, you foolish idiots. It was great. It was so good. But anyways, all right. So we know now the method in which they build the hoaxes and why they build multiple hoaxes, because the smaller hoaxes lend credibility to the tentpole hoax, which is usually the biggest BS, by the way, but it emotionally triggers the most people. That's why it's so important. All right. And we also understand how they launder these hoaxes. Great. Now let's get on something that's not going to upset anybody. Okay? What's happening in the Middle East right now? What's happening in a particular country that speaks English and Hebrew, a secular country? There's a little war going on. You've seen all these, we just outlined 20 of the many more hoaxes around Trump. Do you think maybe that there have been hoaxes regarding that conflict in the Middle East? Because you notice the legacy media and the jihadis are trying really hard to brainwash people, like unusually hard. What is motivating that? Like they are desperate to brainwash people about the Middle East. And remember, I said social proof and repetition, those are the two most powerful persuasion techniques. Do you notice you hear the word all the time? I call it Palpatine because I won't give credibility to that word. But you hear the word Palpatine all the time, and you always see large groups of people, and they're wearing the same decorative items. We'll put it that way. You notice that. That doesn't seem organic. Like if you look at the trucker convoy, it was a mess. It was everybody's just wearing their snowshoes. Everybody had different stuff, and everybody's kind of all over the place doing their own videos, conflicting messages and ideas, because that's organic. But here, you hear them, and this is the secret. This is the secret. It's not organic, and it's constructed. You hear the chant. Chanting is a primary indicator of brainwashing. It's also a primary indicator that it is structured and calculated brainwashing, that is big money that is funding that. It happens to be NGOs and unions. But the chanting is the tell that something is not right. Okay? So why are they so desperate through repetition to implant into the limbic system this word Palpatine and program people to react negatively with such visceral derangement syndrome when they hear the word Israel? Why? It's a country the size of El Salvador. Like, it's so irrelevant. It's a tiny country. But why are people being so programmed to react so viscerally to it? What's happening there? Well, let's first get into why. What's fueling this? Okay. I went to ChatGPT, and some of you might have seen I posted on Substack Notes and on Twitter some headlines from the past. You know what? I should have called them up. Let me pull this up because this is going to be relevant to what I'm discussing. Because remember, our framing of everything right now is we're looking at hoaxes and specifically tentpole hoaxes. Okay, and those are the important ones, the tentpole hoax. So if we look at the parallels between the defamation of Trump and the radicalization that has resulted from it, do you not see the parallels of the defamation of Israel and the parallels to it? I see them. I mean, maybe because I know this file pretty well, intimately, have known it most of my life. But what is it? What is that parallel? Can you think? Can you think of, are there any hoaxes related to the Middle East, what's going on right now in the Middle East? And is there potentially a tentpole hoax? What could be the tentpole hoax for what's happening in the Middle East right now? Any ideas? So here's the I can't put them up on the screen because I'm doing it on Substack and all the others, but I'm going to read the headlines that are from 1948. I think this is from 48, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a bunch of newspapers here, right? So I'll read a couple of them. One is in Extra, the Extra newspaper in England. Remember, we're looking for hoaxes here. And it says, Arab-Israeli war. Battles on two fronts in Jerusalem, stocks dive. Okay, so Arab-Israeli war. That's interesting, right? Because that's a term that was used for 70 years. Arab-Israeli war. And what's the Israelis call the War of Independence. What word is missing from Arab-Israeli war? I don't see Palpatine, right? Or Palpatinians. It's Arab-Israeli war, not Palpatinians. That's odd. Then there's another one here from another newspaper. Palestine invaded by Arabs. Palestine invaded by Arabs. Wait, what? What does that mean? This is how you know a hoax is being formed somewhere. Doesn't tell you exactly what, but it should be a major red flag that's going on. What we're seeing is, and you will have seen it too if you've read about what's happening in the Middle East. You're not hearing this term, the Arab-Israeli war, if you've noticed. What are you hearing? You're hearing this word, some Arabic word called Nakba. Well, why wouldn't they call it the Arab-Israeli war? Like we've called it the Arab-Israeli war. Like, why is the legacy media using an Arabic word when for 70 years they called it the Arab-Israeli war? Why would they replace that with an Arabic word? It's because words can often trigger us to fill in the gaps, right? But words can also be used obviously to brainwash us, but to deflect us in a different direction. So if we're not hearing Arab-Israeli war anymore, and you're hearing this Arabic word, then they can launder Palpatine behind the Arabic word. That's why they're doing it. And they know exactly why they're doing it. And this is an attempt to build revisionist history. So what is the of all there's many hoaxes that are going on around this conflict. And I'm not going to get into the little hoaxes because what we're looking for is the tentpole hoax. What's the tentpole hoax around the current conflict in the Middle East? Well, I went to ChatGPT, and you can do this as well. What did I ask? I asked ChatGPT very simply, when was Palestine a country? When was Palestine a country is what I asked ChatGPT. And it came up with an answer it wasn't all that long. It's pretty simple, concise, because it's not all that complicated. And what it explained was the medieval Ottoman eras, because remember, we had the Ottoman Empire there, and then the Brits were there for a couple of decades, controlling it. There was no sovereign nation. And then you have the establishment of Israel. So where is this Palestinian state? They keep talking about the Palestinian state. Wait, but how? The Ottoman Empire was not a federalist system of government. It was an empire. So how does this work? So I went to ChatGPT, like I said, and it explained the three eras. The medieval and Ottoman eras, where there was Islamic caliphates from the 7th to 16th centuries. And then there was the Ottoman Empire from the 1500s to 1517 to 1917, right? So what is that? 1100 years approximately of caliphates controlling what was the Ottoman Empire. But there's no states there. There's no countries there. And, they often brag that under the Ottoman Empire, you had people that were not Muslim living in the region. Yeah, they're called Sephardic Jews, and they never left. But I'm still looking for this country, right? This state they keep talking about. And then, so 1917 was the end of the Ottoman Empire, which took a few years to really, it's not the world we live in today. Information didn't travel so quickly. And then we get British Mandate from 1920 to 1948. British Mandate. That is says under the British Mandate for Palestine, the term Palestine was used officially for the first time in a modern administration based on the League of Nations mandate after World War II. Okay? This mandate did not constitute a sovereign country, but a territory administered by Britain with conflicting promises made to Jews, Arabs, and various other groups there. Is this the tentpole hoax? Is this what it is? Have we discovered, much like Trump, the tentpole hoax was the fine people on both sides hoax? Is this the tentpole hoax in the Middle East? Is this why they're so desperate, through repetition and social proof and throwing billions of dollars at paying activists on the ground to subvert the West, to, through repetition, program into people's limbic systems to react viscerally when they hear the word Israel and slip into cognitive dissonance and get angry? Is that what's going on? Because it sure smells like it. And there was the Holy Land terrorism trial that many Americans don't know about. In New York, everybody knows. But this was a terrorism trial in the early 90s that uncovered massive money, hundreds of millions of dollars, if I'm not mistaken, that were being laundered into the United States to fund extremism, to subvert the West, subvert the United States from the inside, right? Using these similar tactics. Is this why we see so much revisionist history? Because in the Holy Land Foundation trial, and Brigitte Gabriel talks a lot about this, one of the things they uncovered was the Muslim Brotherhood's declaration on the United States, their declaration of war on the United States and the West. And what it said is how they are going to destroy the United States from within is they are going to use and build the Palestine-Israel conflict to divide the West and get Westerners fighting with each other so they can take over. Just like it expanded across the Middle East after the Roman Empire fell and the Persian Empire was exhausted from fighting the Romans, it expanded in a vacuum. They're using the conflict to try to build a vacuum in the West, is what it looks like. This is why so many people get so frustrated with the obsession with Jews. And this is why, people look at the woke right as the useful idiots who are buying it because they're funding these influencers online unknowingly, they're morons, to promulgate this crap that comes directly from the Muslim Brotherhood's. It wasn't their charter. I think it was their charter, actually. I gotta check which document it was again. But funding this strategy, this foreign strategy to subvert the West, and those of us who understand it are trying to teach people, stop it. They're using this to divide the West. That is their purpose. That's why they're funding all of this stuff. And what do you think? Is this NPC? Is this the tentpole hoax? That all of this propaganda that's being fueled online about a country that never existed? I mean, you can ask these people. You ask the activists. You got to get people who are a little bit, not completely brainwashed, but 80% brainwashed. Ask them this question. Ask them this country you're concerned about that you think was, taken over. When was it established? Who were their founding fathers? What currency did they use? What system of government did they use? Who were their artistic influencers of the era? And how long were they there? When was the country established? Which year? When was it established and when did it fall? Because the Ottoman Empire was there till 1917. So what about this country you talk about? That's the tentpole hoax. That's why they're so invested in brainwashing people in the West to regurgitate this word, Palpatine, because they know it's all fake. It's all fabricated, all of this. And when you get people to understand that this whole fiction, this fabrication of a state that never existed, and you start asking them substantive questions like I said, what's their currency? Who were their sporting athletes? What was the design of it? Where were the borders? Ask them specific questions. At some point, when you ask enough questions, they will slip into some form of cognitive dissonance. They may respond with the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance if they're really bought into it, or they'll start to realize, ooh, something's wrong. So that is the tentpole hoax. The tentpole hoax is the country never existed. That the flag is a fake flag. It's just the country of Jordan with the star removed. It is all a fabrication. And that's why they need to invest in millions of dollars and use the MSA on university campuses to brainwash younger people to buy into this and adopt it like an identity. Because if they adopt it like an identity, then they'll establish the similar psychological framing of TDS, but directed at this country the size of El Salvador. And why do they want that? They want that because, and for the people who are, let's say, literalists of their interpretation of their doctrine, the ISIS types, if you will, ISIS Hamas types, it says in their doctrine that once a country was dominated and was Dar al-Islam, then you must fight for it forever until you get it back. And that's why the next country is Spain, what they call Andalusia. That's why in the extremists' mosques in Canada and in the UK and the United States, they talk about reestablishing the caliphate and going back to the era of Cordoba, where Cordoba was occupied the same way that they've occupied many countries over the years. And that's not to say for individual people of that faith who are good people who leak intelligence to people in the West and want nothing to do with that. There are many of those people. But that is why they're so invested in the tentpole hoax. That's what the Palpatinians are. You know, it's interesting that Yasser Arafat, who was their, the only identifiable person associated with that movement, because, he laundered $3 billion to himself while all the people suffered and he kept them trapped in refugee camps his entire life. He was born in Egypt. This is one of the smaller hoaxes, right? So you have the tentpole hoax, is this country never existed. And here's now one of the smaller hoaxes, that Yasser Arafat was not Palpatinian. He was Egyptian. He had an Egyptian birth certificate. Even Golda Meir had a birth certificate that said mandated Palestine. It was a British birth certificate. Arafat had an Egyptian birth certificate. And in the Judean Samaria region, those are the little dotted lines for people in Israel that I don't know why they dot them out as separate territories. But the Judean Samaria region on the northeast of the country, in 1988, the king of Jordan revoked their Egyptian passports. I'm going to say that again. The people who live in Judea and Samaria, or they call it the West Bank, they had their passports collectively canceled by the Kingdom of Jordan in 1988. You know what that means? They're Jordanian. It's the tentpole hoax. That's how you need to describe it and remember it to people. It is the equivalent of the Fine People hoax with Trump, designed to radicalize people. It's the tentpole hoax around the Middle East conflict, designed to radicalize people, which is why you see it everywhere, because it's fake. My husband and I can't talk about Israel because he doesn't see through the tentpole hoax, while I have stood for Israel the whole time. My Bible is clear. Yeah, that's very interesting too. You mentioned that in the Bible, I don't know how many times it mentions Israel, the nation of Israel. I love I love when people say, Zion, this came from the Muslim Brotherhood in the 60s. There's this frame. This is why everything you're seeing amongst people in the West, the useful idiots, this is Muslim Brotherhood propaganda being laundered through them. One of the things that they said in the 60s, they threatened activists. They said, we're going to turn Zionism into a swear word. And I hear these useful idiots say, oh, Zionism isn't Judaism. Have you read the Bible? There's this book in it called Exodus. And listen, I'm very secular, so I'm not religious here, but it would just be logical and historically accurate that the basic tenet and premise of that religion is Zionism. That's the whole point of it. The whole point of the religion is the book Exodus. Is the people leave the slaves and go have their homeland. That's the whole Bible is about, the Old Testament. Come on. And how to live your life and how kashrut and whatever. But that's the whole premise of the religion. Morons. But anyways, Cheryl, maybe you can explain to your husband the tentpole hoax and all the other hoaxes around it. So I've given you two. That in 1988, those people had their passports and their citizenship revoked by Jordan because they're Jordanian. And that made it Israel's permanent problem, because Israel, being a Western country, couldn't take them out into the desert and slaughter 5,000 of them in the back like the king of Jordan did at that point. Every time there was an uprising, that's exactly what he would do. I see long comments, but they're hard to read on the Substack interface. Maybe there's a way I can turn the comments into black, but anyways, I'll check that out after. So my point is, Cheryl, you're correct. There is both a theological justification, but there is also the secular, modern justification as well, which is what the Islamists are going after. And they need to build this tentpole hoax. This because if people understand history, like the most basic premise that the Ottoman Empire fell in 1917, it was an empire for hundreds of years, two caliphates, one before the Ottomans. And then 28 years later, or whatever it was, that mandate became an established state for the first time. It's the first time there is a state in that region. So it's the tentpole hoax. And then all the other BS around it all collapses when people understand that. So, and some of you may ask, I've had some people, some freedom people, both Bitcoin and in, people tied to the trucker convoy, those sorts of movements, medical freedom movements. I've had people ask me, why do I care so much about this? And listen, there's things I care more about, but it's just really annoying because it's right in front of our faces all the time. And like I illustrated here, just go to woke chat GBT and it'll explain it in 3 seconds. Like it's the easiest thing to understand. But, as I explained with what we went through during COVID, irrespective whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, that's up to you. The whole principle was it was about freedom. And the fight for freedom also includes the fight against theocratic authoritarianism, not just authoritarianism, Western authoritarianism, communist authoritarianism, and theocratic authoritarianism are equally a problem. So that's why you have the Red Green Alliance, which we'll talk about another time. So we'll leave it at that. I'm going to finish off with something positive, and then I'll leave you until we do our space tonight. So the Twitter space at 7:00. Andrea is watching. Somebody says, actually, sorry, I will check myself. Okay, great. I couldn't see your long explanation on Substack on the stream. It's got to be like, one short, 5 to 10 words, or I can't see it and I can't respond. You also, if you're watching on locals, you can actually post pictures and memes, and it's easier to see. So just, for reference. So where's the positive and we're at in all of this stuff? Because I do like to talk about some positivity, because it's very easy to get trapped in everything is negative all the time, right? Cheryl, we've discussed this as well, and Pam and everybody else. Well, first, this AI thing I think is great. I don't think it's the boogeyman that we thought it was, because we're now seeing the limitations. There is a hard line of limitation of AI. I was watching a video on it a couple of days ago explaining why it can only go so far with our current LLMs, okay? But we live in this time right now where we perceive that there is chaos all over the place, and I don't think that's the case. Any of you who have neighbors who you disagree with but you talk to and you're polite with, you realize that we can only allow ourselves to be manipulated to make everything in our lives about politics 100% of the time. Now, I read a lot of tech, watch a lot of tech videos, know some tech creators, and some of them are a little bit woke. They're not so bad, but they're a little bit. Okay, whatever. I don't care. That's their problem, right? I'm interested in what we agree on, which is the tech. So I think in our day-to-day lives, yeah, we see all the noise online that gives the perception that we're always at each other's throats all the time. But I think it's farther from the case. I think these are the corner cases. And you really see, I noticed last time I was on a plane recently, when El Salvador or Colombia, I can't remember, was flying into Florida, and what you see these things, you get a zoomed in perspective, like today with the car incident at the protest, where I hope nobody was killed, God forbid. But you see a little protest, whether it's 50,000, 100,000 people, whatever, in a small area. That is such a minute percent of the overall landmass. It is so small. It's the corner cases. That's why the jihadis are so desperate to do this all over the world, because they're losing. I do believe that they are losing. And because of some of the chaos that we've seen, October 7th is a good example. That really has ripped the Band-Aid off. There's a lot of people who were involved in politics, myself and others, that were trying to sound the warning alarms about what's been going on in the world, and that we basically have a global mafia that's involved in our political parties, laundering billions of dollars for terrorism in many countries. That's what's going on. That's the simplest way to describe it. Your global mafia is in your political parties, okay? And they're trying to draft legislation. But after people saw the kind of barbarism and savagery that is not becoming of a human being, on October 7th. You can't shake that. That's why, I'm a big proponent encouraging people. You need to watch those horrible, awful videos. You really need to. Because it hits you. You realize the severity of what it is, and that there are people alive today living in the 7th century with that level of barbarism. I might even argue worse. And when you see that, that's not something you can shake. That gets drilled right into your subconscious when you see that sort of shocking behavior. I mean, for me, when I hear young women burned alive, I just want to grab them. And I want to kill them. I just and that is a normal human reaction, I think. But you need to see them. You need to see it so you understand what many of us have been warning about for over a decade. Some of us 2-3 decades, because this has been going on for a long time. But now, since that event, people in the West, doesn't matter they're left or right, people all over across the political spectrum are waking up, and there's a lot of people on like the political left that are still struggling to process this. And because it was so shocking, and you see something like that, it's we think you press one button and it changes people. It's actually a process, as I described earlier when we were talking about that. So encourage people to watch a little bit of the savagery, as difficult as it is. It's important. And all of this is why, as ironic as this, I'm positive, because at least now people see it. Before, nobody cared. Nobody paid attention. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't matter, whatever. Now people get it. Now people are waking up. And you can't solve a problem if you're not awakened. But more and more people are now. And I think that's why we're going to see, I still maintain we are going to see an age of, as Stephen and I talk about it, a digital age of enlightenment is around the corner. We're going to get there. But there's going to be a lot of these bumps in the road and struggles till we get there. But we will. And we'll only get there if more and more people are awake and understand the threats of what's been going on in the world. And this global mafia, this vicious global mafia that doesn't care about you or I, that are here to destroy the West. And when people understand that, those alien values, and they're not tolerated in the West, then they're over. And that's why Israel is the tentpole hoax. Or should I say the Palpatinians that are in Israel, that is the tentpole hoax. And Trump knows that, by the way. That's why he wants to move them to other countries in the jurisdiction. And they know once they move to another country, another jurisdiction, the tentpole hoax is over. It's done. And then there will be significantly more peace than there is right now. So, okay, I think, that went way longer than I wanted to, but let me know, Cheryl and everybody else, does that help clarify things? MPC, send me some feedback. I think this is an important framing for people to understand how to look at the Middle East. Then there's the other dynamic of understanding who is involved in the news, that the news story itself, Scott talks about this, but this is something you learn in politics or in business, actually, very early. It's not what you hear, it's who's behind what you hear that matters. We'll get into that a little bit later. But let me know. Give me some feedback. Tell me if you think that's helpful. Tonight, Andrea and I are going to do a Twitter space at 7 o'clock tonight. We're having Sin and Ron, who are both, how should we describe them? They are experts in intel and terrorism and money laundering and all that sort of stuff. Fascinating guys, military guys. And something massive has happened in Latin America with regards to this issue. Like I said, that global mafia that has been laundering money and funding terrorism all over the world, they just got egg on their face in Latin America, and it has very real implications on the United States, Canada, and the West. And Sin is going to explain that and map it out for us. And those of you who've been following me for a long time, you know I love Latin America. I've lived there, and me encanta la cultura allá. And so this is, for me, it's particularly exciting when we see, people around the world are starting to understand this problem and how it's been pervasive both in Latin America and here. Sometimes we're going to talk about us fired healthcare workers. Yes, I know some of them. So that is a problem as well. We should talk about that. Go back and watch this. I hope this was helpful. And if you love me, send me a message. If you hate me, send me a message. Whatever. It doesn't bother me. I have no fear of engaging with people on the other side, and I think we need to do more of that, anyways. But I hope this was helpful, and I'm trying to do my best to give back. And also remember, check out my article, which is in Substack, but also now in Zero Hedge and the Daily Bell, about Scott Adams and Grok Adams. And if you can do us all a good, I don't know if it's a favor for me, but maybe it's a good deed. Send it to Elon Musk, tag Elon Musk, tag Tesla, send it to the Tesla email as a suggestion. It would be really great to see if that was implemented at some point on Scott's behalf. I think you would appreciate it. And that's just, trying to do good things for other people. We can't always talk about negative things. Sometimes we can talk about good things and turn negative situations like Scott's illness. And by the way, he's got some other treatment that may have a 30% chance of success. So it'd be even better if it was implemented in the cars and he managed to get through this difficult time. That would be amazing. So I love you all. Love the healthcare workers. And we'll talk to you soon. And I don't know when I'm going to do this next, probably on Saturday, because I'm going to be on the road for a couple of days. But I am going to be around here, and I'm trying to figure out when I'm in Florida next, if there's a way I can schedule to do more regular presentations like this and talks with you and get more of you into the live chat so you can send your comments and questions. So send me anything you want, and I love you all. And I'm just going to go to the locals subscribers for a couple of minutes to see who is there.